SantaCruz.com. I founded Metro Santa Cruz 20 years ago and recently acquired Good Times with a partner a year and a half ago.
Good afternoon. I am not Michael C. Watkins, but I work for Michael. I'm the Associate Superintendent of the County Office. My name is Mary James. He is meeting with President Obama right now. Couldn't make it, so you got me instead. It was tough. He literally went, oh gosh, I don't know. So I'll be speaking on it.
My name is Don Lane, and I'm the mayor, currently the mayor of City of Santa Cruz, and I've served on the city council with Mike Rotkin, and I'm also chairperson of an organization called Smart Solutions to Homelessness. Thank you, Don.
I thought I was going to be on the cannabis piano. I don't know much about, so I did a lot of research last night. What was the question?
We were saying there's no samples. You know.
I am Chip. I am with the Downtown Association here in Santa Cruz.
Thank you. Okay, so let's start off with our first speaker. So what we're going to do is we're going to go speaker, and then we're going to open it up to questions for our vast audience.
Okay, so we're told we have about 4 to 6 minutes each. If I understand this, I'll make it up. I'll go for 5. I want to talk about some of the contradictions in being a sustainable community. And first thing to say is around most of the United States, in most communities, there are coalitions between labor and business that are in opposition to environmental perspectives. And typically in those communities, that labor business coalition rules, and they make the decisions about development and growth. And if they do anything environmental, it's because somebody made them and they're forced to do it, not because it's their natural instinct. Santa Cruz, starting in the early 70s, late 60s, early 70s, and up to the present, is quite different than that. We have a coalition here between environmentalists and labor, and also local business as part of that in a significant way. And the result of that is we've been able to make some really dramatic changes in the town. I'll start with the good news, which is we really have transformed Santa Cruz. It used to be one of the most conservative communities in California. Our Congress member, Bert Talcott, who served 8 terms, was a member of the John Birch Society, and very, very conservative. And on any issue you could pick, it wouldn't really matter. Our local paper, the Sentinel, she'll probably talk about this more, but it was controlled by the 5th generation, 5 generations of the McPherson family. Their news source for international news was the UPI, United Press International, because they didn't want the Associated Press because it was a communist news source, quote unquote, from the editor of the paper. So this was a right-wing town. The 1964 general plan for the city of Santa Cruz, to get a sense of what this business group that ran Santa Cruz wanted, was to create second homes for the wealthy, where there's now Wilder Ranch, 10,000 homes for the wealthy on the North Coast, really covering the agricultural area. A nuclear power plant at Davenport, double-deck Mission Street, turn California and King Street into one-way directions of the freeway, in addition to double-deck Mission. Turn Ocean Street from its current 4 lanes into an 8-lane entrance into the beach, and turn Chestnut, which is currently 2 lanes, into 6 lanes out the other direction. I can go on. See, 2 16-story towers on Frederick Street, right next to where Frederick Street Park is right now. And none of that stuff has happened. And that's the result of this coalition where environmentalists found a way to work with people concerned about social issues, concerned about what I'll call class issues in general, the willingness to try and have a diverse community that would really be different. We had a lot of accomplishments in the heyday of that coalition in terms of what we accomplished. Number one, we have a green belt around the city of Santa Cruz. We're one of the few communities in the United States that actually has put a limit on skip-out development out into what's in wild lands. So we have a fairly compact city, and it ends up being a kind of a critical thing environmentally, and also in terms of cost. You're out there building subdivisions for wealthy people that the people in the center pay for. We don't do that in our town. We, at one point in the 1990s, the city of Santa Cruz was spending more per capita on social services than any other city in the United States. We have fallen from that. Some of that we can blame on the federal government, that it's dysfunctionality. We don't get funds we used to get from them. But some of it's a question of like what commitment the council has overall and the county board of supervisors have to funding these kinds of programs. We still do better than most communities, so we've fallen from being number one. We're probably not even in the top 10 anymore, probably still in the top 20. We have a community that's committed to education. We managed to pass taxes on the ballot for improving our educational system, where other communities are in California refusing to pass taxes for education. We've got we still have, as I say, significant kinds of social programs. We have a really vibrant arts community. This new coalition said you used to spend nothing on the arts. We now have the Cultural Council that was created as a result of this coalition. The politics have been gendered. In terms of government employment, we had the city workforce was 20% women and 1% people of color. It's now it's in parity. It's about 50. The city workforce is about 50% female, and the population of various ethnic groups reflects the city workforce reflects the population that lives here. It's still not as integrated as it should be because our community is not as integrated as it should be, but the city has made great strides in that affirmative action program. There's a lot of other stuff I can get into. We also, at one point, had the highest percentage of affordable housing of any city in California. It was only 11%, which is pathetic. It should be 50% or something, but nobody else was doing better than we were doing. And again, some of this stuff we have slipped away from it. And why does that happen? This is in 4 minutes or 5 minutes, this is what I can tell you. I think we've kind of lost some sight of the big picture, and that coalition is kind of frayed at its edges. And there's an awful lot of struggle and fight going on between the environmental community, or people that consider themselves the environmental community, and the people who are concerned about social issues, about need services for low-income people, and those kinds of questions. And as a result, we look at it, I'll just give you some examples of what I'm talking about. We have this huge greenbelt that I talked about. After 25 years of this greenbelt, actually now it's been only 30 years almost since we started the effort to preserve it, we have one bicycle path across that, that greenbelt that you can ride your bike across the Ronald Gulch. There are no areas with picnic benches where people can have a picnic with their family. The Promise Sports, and that Measure O that got that greenbelt was a coalition of people interested in recreation for kids and people interested in preserving the environment. Well, there's no ball fields for anybody. That stuff doesn't exist. There's an awful lot of kids either can't afford to be part of a team that can afford to rent a field that does exist. The city makes its best efforts here, but it really has been difficult to provide the kind of services that particularly low-income people need. But this generally, people that work for a living. Our housing crisis has gotten just completely out of control. It's not separate from the homeless stuff that Don's going to no doubt talk about, but we are no longer the city with the highest percentage of affordable housing. We're still doing our best to make efforts here, but we're slipping in those kinds of areas. Because now what happens is, people are not looking at the big picture. Where are we going to put our affordable housing? People are focused on a particular project. And unfortunately in this town, the word smart growth, which is where most communities are beginning to figure out, how do you grow in a way that's rational, that doesn't pave your town over, that preserves the natural environment in your town, around your town. People call smart growth, it's a nasty word. And I literally have been in hearings where people will say, oh, smart growth, that's just a way to kind of sell growth, and it's really a bad thing, we don't want any growth. And as a result, it's not a mischaracterization to say that there are a significant number of political actors in town, some of whom were doing good work in that early coalition process, who are now saying things like, well, every vacant lot should stay vacant. Don't build a house on a vacant lot. None of them. Who are saying that the affordable housing that we built with the accessory units in Santa Cruz should now be used for like visitors, so that people can who are lucky enough to own a house here, now can rent that out to visitors rather than provide affordable housing for the people who live and work in this community. So we need to reignite the ignition of a real coalition between social issues, between the labor movement and the environmental movement. Otherwise, I think people take it for granted that we can never be a conservative town again, but I don't rule that possibility out. 2 police officers get shot. You find a lot of people thinking we need to spend more money on public safety, and maybe we're spending too much on the homeless and too much on social services. We need to fight for a coalition that will retain that initial vision of both being a beautiful town environmentally, but being a town where working people can afford to live here, and not have all the people that work in our tourist industry living in Watsonville and now living in Salinas and coming in from other places. So that's all I can say in 5 minutes. I don't give up on Santa Cruz. We can rebuild build that coalition, but it's going to take effort to make it happen. It's not automatic, and it is slipping away from us if we don't do something about it. Thanks.
Well, thank you for coming, those of you who came. I want to talk mostly about something that has been rattling around in my brain recently, and a little bit about a solution that I think I could be a small part of. And that is economic vitality. I participate in a lot of focus groups and brainstorming sessions and community discussions of all kinds. And what keeps coming up is this idea of economic vitality. And as a subset of that, job creation. And as a subset of that, a specific kind of job creation. And what we are recognizing is that we've got this educated, innovative population and not the right kind of jobs to keep these people stimulated for an entire career, that it's hard to retain or attract. We've got a lot of low-level service jobs, which those are valuable and respectable, but we need to fill in with this other level of job creation. There's a lot of groups that are working on it, and we recently went up to Seattle and Victoria. Dawn was on that trip and talked to the University of Seattle and other groups locally. The new words in my vocabulary, maybe all of you know about them. I've been hearing these word terms for the last year and a half. Tech transfer, incubators, and accelerators. And a lot of it is just taking knowledge that's being created largely at the university and transferring it to actual jobs and applications that can be monetized, taking it from research and knowledge to creating jobs. And my role could possibly be, well, let me back up a minute. How we get the word out to people about our community it could potentially be enormously expensive. How do you really promote our community as a place that will attract these people? And I read a lot and I talk to a lot of people, and I don't remember where I picked up the idea that if we're going to attract creative, innovative people, we need to have a rich culture. That these people are attracted to cities that have great culture, great recreation, food culture, farm to table, lots of independent local businesses. They don't want to live where there are strip malls and chain stores. And natural beauty. I mean, does that sound familiar to anyone? We've got all of that. And we're really creating it much more so. Some of it is relatively recent, like the Tannery Arts Center. The Colligan Theater is about to open. The Maw has just become this explosive creative center, and Abbott Square is being developed there. First Friday that Chip founded is just amazing and is getting bigger all the time. There's all these little pop-ups, 17th Avenue Studios and Simcoe Cousin Artist Collective. And we've got live music 7 days a week at so many places. It's quite incredible. But how do we get the word out? That's part of it. Because there is a lot of money to promote us as a tourist destination. The money mostly comes from the TOT tax that the hotels have, and they're willing to promote the boardwalk and the mystery spot and bring money because that immediately translates to dollars. But how do we really talk to residents? And so I kind of realized, hey, we've got SantaCruz.com, this amazing domain that everyone on that site is either there because they live here or are coming here or interested in this community for some reason. And it would cost hundreds of thousands of dollars to brand us to the world and promote us to the world. But we could use that site. I just would love to get a group of people together who want to brand. Who are we in terms of communicating to these creative geniuses that we want to come and save us? A lot of them are here. We just want to keep them here. So I'd like to get a group together. I'm not going to go rogue and be arrogant and make up all these things myself, but there's a lot of different things that we can do with that website. And I plan to, in January, and this won't be devolved into a promotion for SantaCruz.com, I plan in January to add a lot of video content and a lot more content that I think will take that site and really be something that can be used for the good of all of us. So that's, and I just want to say that a couple of other quick things that are happening. The Genome Institute on campus has just hired a new director, Robbie Jane, to help with this idea of tech transfer. He's got a doctorate in molecular evolution, but is really going to look at how we can take that information and knowledge and monetize it. A lot of it's biomedical. There's a lot of money that could take advantage, because they made that open source, which is so wonderful that scientists all over the world can take that, the human genome that they completed, the DNA sequence for it, they can take that information and just use it at no charge. But there is a lot of medicine and treatments that can be developed that could help with financing. So there's a lot of companies that Robbie has ideas about, and that's exciting. That's a new thing. And then Sue Carter is up at the university. She's running I think it's called the Center for Innovation and Entrepreneurial something development. And she's got a staff of 4. And when we were at the University of Washington, they have 50 people doing what she's doing, what she and her team are doing. And we listened to these 50 people talk about, I think they've had 36 startups in the last year or 2 years, you know, that they've created and sustained in their community. And just the idea that we can build tech jobs is pretty exciting. So that's it.
I'm enjoying being a learner as well as being a speaker. I was asked to talk a little bit about the state of education in Santa Cruz, and that sounds like such a real new conversation. I'll just tell you a little bit about the trends. But I just first want to say that though I focus on K-12, mostly that's the experience of the county office is mostly geared towards. It's just an extraordinary opportunity to live in a community where within an hour's drive you have 2 state universities, 1 UC, 3 community colleges, and then, well, at least in the county of Santa Cruz, 12 charter schools, a large number of private schools. It's just very exciting. And I like the word incubator. There's a lot of potential. I would say there's a lot fewer partnerships between higher education and K-12 than you would think. But I do understand that in the world of grant writing, that there's a lot of focus on broader impact, so that someone that's a researcher that needs to work with K-12 if they want to get the kind of national grants that we're looking at. So that's just a word about partnerships, but it is an extraordinary place to live in when you think about education. So Santa Cruz County, we have 10 school districts, about 40,000 students between K-12. About a third of them are English language learners. More than half of them are low-income families. So when you look at Santa Cruz County as a whole, it's a very diverse area. We have 4 one-school districts. There's like 100, 120 kids in there. Very tight-knit communities that don't want to share their school boundaries with anyone. And then a number of small school districts, middle-sized, and then Pajaro Valley, where half of our school students live, about 20,000 in Pajaro Valley. So some of the trends and I'm not going to tell you things you haven't heard before, certainly the new Common Core standards that are really focused on making sure that school students get opportunities for real life problem solving, that they're working on project-based learning, so their hands and their minds are engaged. And certainly the word engagement is probably the key term right now. How do we make sure that students stay engaged? How do we make sure their teachers remain engaged in their profession? And then certainly families and community involvement. Speaking of teachers, the shortage right now is just looming. About a third of the 300,000 teachers in California are between 58 and 62. So a teacher shortage is the big issue that we're thinking about now, how do we get young people to focus back into education, and that is a clear, direct response to the recession that we lived in, people, as well as the aging population, but certainly we don't have as many people going into the profession of teaching. Certainly within the state of California, a seismic shift on funding. You might have heard of the terms local control funding formula. So our governor believes very strongly in the idea of subsidiary, where local decisions are made best by decisions of people that live there. So a lot of the funding that used to come either county-wide or region-wise now goes directly to school districts. So the power of school boards is enormous now, because those decisions are made for the community. So stakeholder engagement, you have a lot of superintendents now that spend more time talking to their community even than they talk to their school board. So that's changed a little bit, a lot more local control, and the funding is directed more for students that have been historically underserved. So the funding would go based to a school district based on how many kids they have, and then for students that are either foster youth, low income English learners, or special education students, they get a certain amount of money on top of that. So that practicality is really important because you want kids to have extra opportunities, whether it's through summer learning or after school learning or intervention. So that part of the funding has changed for school districts. For county offices where we work, it's meant that we have to sell to our community. So rather than do a lot of professional training for districts, we wait and ask, what do you need? Because the funding is with them. And I think that part is good. In terms of other trends, educational technology is changing the world that our students are lived in, and certainly the adults. It's much harder for your veteran teachers to figure out what ed tech is, but many of our schools and the majority of our districts are very focused on one-to-one devices. So if you're a school that doesn't have one-to-one devices or bring your own devices, there's multiple computer labs and computer carts. So that has really changed it. And the reason we're excited about it is it makes teachers innovative. We have a lot of, as I mentioned, older teachers that, for many years have, let me pull out the file on when I teach algorithms in this area, and I'll pull it out and I'll teach it the way I've already taught it. And because of educational technology, we're much more able to individualize learning, and also from the teacher's point of view, they become learners as well. So that part is really exciting to watch. Career technical education is a really important part. The state is moving much more towards a way to measure success by having kids demonstrate being college and career ready. So how do you do that in a 3rd grade classroom? How do you do that in a 12th grade classroom? So just for fun, we mixed it all up and changed the assessment systems. So students this past May took their first series of online tests. They were all on computers. I think probably in the state of California there was 4 districts that did it, paper and pen. So that just blew up everything. First they had to have enough computers, then they had to figure out that if you take a 10-minute break, it doesn't save, and you have to start all over again. And it was a monster change. But for school districts, what that meant was they had to invest a considerable amount of money in technology, which also came a long time with Common Core. So that part was all good. I wanted to talk a little bit about these partnerships that I mentioned. There's an organization in our county called the Santa Cruz County College Commitment. It's S4C now, S4C, but it's moving towards college and career readiness. And so the idea that our students need to graduate with experiences in the career world, whether it's career panels after high school, whether it's job shadowing or internships, or whether it's courses that come from career technical education where they're taught by people that are in industry and come back to the educational world to really teach about the practical areas. And our community and industry has really said, we want kids to come with soft skills, like can they work on a team, can they get along with others, are they punctual, but also the technical knowledge, so that they can go into an apprenticeship with one of our trades. And so that part is really exciting. I also learned this morning that there's an organization in Limeville called Cradle to Career, and that Supervisor John Leopold is working with the school district and First Five. So there's a number of partnerships and collaborations, and our job is to make sure we're all going in the same direction and not recreating the wheel. The other thing I did want to say is just an example of why education in Santa Cruz County is exciting. On Friday, I had an opportunity to visit the San Lorenzo Valley Aquaponics. I guess you would call it a greenhouse. It's a monstrous organization done all by free work. There's a gentleman by the name of John Parr who works for School Grown, whose task or whose goal it is to create aquaponics center in every school in the United States. So they took the best of aquaculture, where they're raising fish, and hydroponics, where you grow the plants that are floating. But hydroponics, every 2 weeks you throw the water out. So aquaponics now is aquaculture with the fish, hydroponics with the water, but you keep the water in there. So these are huge lanes up in the hills of San Lorenzo Valley where they're growing a billion different kinds of lettuce, and they have carrots and all sorts of root vegetables as well. And it's all self-sustained. So they did that on no funding for the school. Scarborough Lumber gave them a lumber. It's just extraordinary. So what you get to see with the kids is that they're creating a way, either by growing their fish or by working in the aquaculture, to be able to show that they can live sustainable. They have these new solar units that they're going to put up by another starter in Scotts Valley, where they're pink solar panels. So they're put on the roof so that it collects some of the right rays that are for photosynthesis. You can see I'm kind of out of my comfort zone there. But just to watch, just to see this in action, and this gentleman, John Parr, worked all summer for free. He has another person for free. His goal is to create that kind of sustainable opportunities for students, because they're the ones that are going to be figuring out how to get the food in. Apparently it's 5 times quicker to raise a head of lettuce floating in water than in the ground. So not that we want to put out our South County lettuce growers into danger, but just some amazing things. And that's at a high school. They said, take our space and do it. So those kind of small examples are all over this county, whether it's biotech in Harbor High School or San Lorenzo Valley or Watsonville High with the Wetlands Watch. You can tell I get excited about talking about education. So those are the trends. What else did I want to say? As of this week, they canceled the Casey exam, so any of you that had to pass the Casey exam to graduate, sorry you didn't really need to pass it, because now we'll give you a diploma anyway. Our big job is to figure out, how do we find out those students that didn't pass in 2004 and tell them that they can come back and get a diploma. So there's never a dull moment in education in California, so hopefully later you can ask questions.
First, I just want to thank you all for inviting me to participate in this, and thank you for coming to listen. I want to talk about ending homelessness. And the reason I I got into that issue is that I think in Santa Cruz, and I'm going to make a leap here to say that everyone on this panel has dealt with homelessness in a really significant way. Mike, as a city official, Jeannie, as a news media person who's covered that issue in this community, the schools that Mary Ann deals with, there are hundreds, if not thousands, of homeless students in our county, and Chip deals with homelessness on the streets of downtown on a daily basis. So everyone, including me, have had to deal with this issue for many years. And so as a city council member and mayor, I decided that it was important for me to learn more about homelessness and try and think about this problem. It's such a huge and persistent problem in our community. So in my learning, what I discovered was that there's a lot going on around the country and beginning to happen here that has to do with a movement to end homelessness. And I'm going to talk about really quickly about a few of the ways that we can end homelessness. One is prevention of homelessness. The best way for us to reduce homelessness in this community is to make sure that when people are teetering on the brink of losing their housing, that we have a quick and very inexpensive intervention just to keep them in their housing. Sometimes it's as simple as paying somebody's rent for 1 month so that they don't lose their housing and kind of can move back from the brink. Another tool that is being used nationally and some locally is what's called rapid rehousing. In other words, that's the next step. Someone who does in fact lose their housing, very quickly, a very quick intervention can often be just to get them, find them a new place, just pay the first and last month's rent for them, and then get that family or that individual back into housing quickly before all the challenges that emerge when someone has been homeless for a long time, before those emerge. Because if someone just has fallen into homelessness, their life might not have deteriorated to the point where it's going to be a real struggle to sustain their housing. So getting people back into housing quickly is really important. For people who have been homeless for a long period of time, the solution that is working quite well locally and nationally is something called permanent supportive housing. And that means finding an apartment or a home for a person who's been chronically homeless for a long time, finding a housing unit for them, and at the same time with subsidy and providing supportive services to help that person sustain their housing and sustain success in their life. And this is a very challenging proposition, because it does mean that we're not setting any barriers or standards for people who've been chronically homeless to move into their housing. If they have a mental health problem, if they have a substance abuse problem, that it does not require that they beat those problems first and then as a reward they get into housing. This is an important idea, because people who've been homeless for a long time and who are currently on the street, they're not in the position to beat their addiction, for instance, or treat their mental illness, because their lives are so unstable that that's not a place of good recovery. So that we flip the paradigm and say, let's get people into housing first, give them a place where they can have success, and then provide the services to help them have success. And a fourth one I want to mention quickly is what we call transitional housing for foster youth, for transition age youth. The foster care system has been dumping literally hundreds and thousands of young people onto the streets, because when they aged out of foster care, they had no support whatsoever to succeed. They didn't have a family that might help them transition into independent living, and so that became a huge source of homelessness. So now there's a lot of new programming going on around transitional housing for that particular group of young people, so that they get into some stable housing and get some support to just make the transition to independent life, even in the absence of family support. So now I want to point out something really quickly about all the things that I just listed. None of those things, as you will notice, focused on temporary shelter, what we think of as kind of the old-fashioned idea of dealing with homelessness. That was an old model that basically said we would sustain people who were homeless in their homelessness. We would provide life-supporting activity, food, and a temporary shelter, but nothing to end their homelessness. And so what you will notice in all of what I proposed is that we think about this basic concept that's so simple but not often understood, which is the solution to homelessness is housing. In every instance, the only way a person becomes not homeless is if they're in a home. And so we need to really break the old paradigm. We do need to have emergency shelter, we do need to have emergency meals, but they always have to be linked to a system where the purpose is to end the homelessness of each individual entering that system. So just in closing, I'll say, where can we go with this? One is something that Mike touched on, which is we do need to support the development of housing in our community, especially small units of rental housing. That's a need for both people who've been homeless and other people on the lower end of the economic scale. We don't have enough of that kind of housing, and that is one key element toward the solution. Another is to encourage landlords to accept housing subsidy vouchers so that people who are coming out of homelessness can actually find a place to live. Sometimes there's money, there are resources to move people out of homelessness, but there isn't an available unit. So we need to really work with landlords to get them to accept these vouchers and welcome people who had been homeless and who are ready to move on into that housing. And then the last thing is to just become advocates for what I call, and my organization calls, smart solutions to homelessness, which is constantly thinking about our resources going not to exclude emergency shelter and emergency services, but to always advocate for programs that use that emergency system to move people into permanent solutions to homelessness, which again is housing. Thanks.
Hi everyone, this is fun, thanks for being here. I am Chip, I'm the executive of the Downtown Association, and I've recently decided my job description is to manage complexity without simplifying it. But I'm going to kind of simplify some complexities today. I'm a downtown evangelist. I believe in downtown. I believe genuinely that downtowns are the last hope of the American dream. All of the issues we talked about today, the environmental and labor issues, economic vitality, education, homelessness, I really sincerely believe that the answers to all these, or the solutions to all these issues, can be found in downtown. And I'll explain what I mean by that in a little bit. And I think downtown Santa Cruz in particular, you know, I'm a fan of downtowns in general as a concept, and the urban world that is re-emerging, but downtown Santa Cruz, I think, has some extraordinary opportunities in a qualified way. I'm going to talk a little about all of that. Jeannie talked about economic vitality. Millennial job growth is really the key to economic vitality right now. The millennials, I think a lot of people out here are millennials who are in between, I think it's 80 and 95 is what we're calling millennials. Largest cohort now in the American workforce, highly educated. Basically, that you guys are the economic engine of the foreseeable future. And that's important on a lot of levels. I think that the idea of downtown as a place to be, a place to live, a place to work is really important. But that's just the foundation, and there's a lot of other things that we need to be aware of as we're really courting you guys to come work and live and play downtown. And I'm going to talk about all of these, and I'll just start with housing. There is a drive to live in urban centers where it's interesting and culturally diverse and fun and exciting, and developers have dollar signs in their eyes saying, yeah, there's these millennials who are going to be working innovation, making $250,000 their first year out of college. Let's make them fancy houses. We also need affordable housing. We also need housing for, you know, single mothers with 3 kids. We need a range of housing in our downtown cores. We run the risk of flipping this dynamic that it used to be downtown was where you lived when you couldn't afford to live in the suburbs. Now there's this draw to living in urban centers because it's not as interesting as to live in the suburbs. It's much more expensive, the mobility, the inconvenience of it. There's a number of reasons, from global factors to just, you know, culture, convenience, that are drawing people. Also boomers who are trying empty nesters who have big houses that they want to downsize and want to be close to services. You know, so there's this big draw for downtown. So downtowns are becoming more and more expensive. So we need to be aware of not making this flip so only people who can afford to live in downtown live in downtown. We need a mix of housing. We need a mix, not just affordable and high-end. We need a range of housing downtown. That's something we need to continue to think about. Education is really important for downtowns, and we have a great education system. The tech transfer is important. The cradle to career is really important. We should be looking at not just how do we get the university to stay in the workforce here and create industry here, but how do we get our kindergartners in Santa Cruz to have a life and a career and be able to build a career here and have jobs for them, prepare them for jobs. So it's not just attracting workforce here. We want to prepare our kids for that. Mobility is huge, and this is something I can spend, you know, the rest of the day talking about, but I won't. Downtown really needs to. We really need to be paying attention to how we get around, how we get in and out of downtown, how we do that in an efficient way, and how it's accessible. Mobility is accessible for everyone. All of these issues, there's huge social equity connotations to them. How we deal with housing, education. Our education needs to be accessible on a culturally diverse level, on economically diverse. We need to continue to be very aware of that as our cities and especially our downtowns are getting more and more popular. We need to make sure it's a downtown for everybody to work. And finally, I swim in the world of retail quite a bit. Downtown is the place where you come to shop. Similarly, we need to pay attention to that. We love the $18 burger, right? It's fun, it's cool, love to go out and spend a lot of money downtown. And we need a diverse economic options too, so people can come down and spend money. If they live downtown, they can go to CVS, they can go, you know, get clothes. So we have a really good mix of retail options in downtown Santa Cruz. We need need to maintain that and really be aware of how downtown can support people so you don't have to travel and commute and get on a bus or, so everybody can live here. And we need to maintain that downtown is a livable. Here's your role. The other really big piece of it is the culture and the entertainment. Your job is to go see live music. And that's really important because, as downtowns are changing, as technology is changing, downtown is the place where we come together as a culture. Downtown is where we come together as a community, where we exchange ideas, where we exchange. There's a lot of cool things for sale downtown, and I can buy most of them right here. But I can't buy live music right here. I can't buy a cocktail with my friends, and I'm going to go out and support the retail because it's a really fun experience downtown. So go be part of that culture, be part of the community, go do something culturally that you wouldn't normally do. There's this amazing music festival going on right now. There's also the symphony is opening tonight. There's dance performances, there's sporting events. Pick up the good times and look through it and say, I don't see myself in that, so I'm going to go there, right? Have fun and just engage in your community, and thanks so much for being here. And that's all I have to say.
Well, thank you so much, panelists. This panel is called, of course, the state of Santa Cruz, but most of our questions that we had on Facebook were about the future of Santa Cruz for this. So, they talked about like real estate market, which we discussed, the job market, but I was thinking about, I think something you mentioned, Jeannie, about how to get the word out. So, for one thing, I want to kind of ask, like, what is the word? What are we trying to project to the world, and what is our objective in doing that? Are we trying to get tech companies to come here? Are we trying to get more people to come here? If we do, is that going to raise the prices of house? Like, so what are we trying to project, and what's our objective? Any thoughts on that?
Martin, I think one of the issues that, think about tech jobs, for example. I think the old model of tech jobs is, and I did this, send the mayor to Chicago to try and recruit some firms to come to Santa Cruz, and we'll then hire people when they get here. And it's not a very effective model. I went a couple of times. Chicago's just one place I went. It doesn't really work, and you're trying to sell a completely foreign concept to somebody who's thinking that you have to relocate here and change all this stuff. It's not that you'll never be successful, but it's not very commonly going to be the case. Our problem is we have a tremendous, the university and the local community colleges and other places generate ideas. People out of that, ideas for new kinds of products and services are sparked. And we're really great at all over town. There are places where in a garage or in a bedroom or on the internet, wherever they have to keep your computer, people are developing these new ideas and putting them in and monetizing them, actually trying to create a small little thing. And it works great when they have 4 employees and 5, maybe even up to 10 employees and now working out of the garage. Maybe when it gets to be 10, the neighbors are not so happy. But it's a small little thing and it's fine. But at that point, a huge number of these companies go over the hill. They leave here and they go to Palo Alto where they want to hire 100 people to scale up and actually start to have jobs for people who are not themselves scientists, but who would be able to do technical work, coming out of our educational system if they're prepared for it. That job is not here at Santa Cruz. And so that's something that we really, that's the whole idea about incubators. How do you take a little garage in your home which you can run on a shoestring and not, well, I want to turn this into a big company. At some point I'm going to be, it's going to be an IPO, we're going to do all this wonderful stuff. Well, Santa Cruz doesn't necessarily have the lawyers that you need. How do you incorporate your business? You're going to go end up on the phone talking to somebody in San Jose about how you do that kind of work. They don't necessarily have, not that there's nobody doing this work here, but the resources for that are somewhere else. And so this community needs to find a way to figure out how we can supply what it is that somebody who's got a little startup of 4 or 5 people need to make that grow here and hire 50 people coming out of our local educational system. Significant number of the kids coming out of Santa Cruz High, for example, which is a good school, and kids, my son went there. They're not going to college right out of school. They're just not going to. It's about 50% are not going right to college as they leave high school. I went to a vocational high school in Wheaton, Maryland, decades ago. Almost a long 70 years ago. Anyway. But for those kids that are leaving that, what are they getting in terms of being prepared for a career? our educational system's beginning to turn in that direction. We have some ideas about it, but it's not in place yet by a long shot. So that you have to have the people who want those 50 jobs when someone creates them, because it doesn't make any sense for them to stay here if they can go find 50 people like that in the Silicon Valley. You have to make sure that they get the kind of resources they need to start up that kind of a business, or to move it from a very small startup to a reasonable scale. And they need to have a place to do it. And so there has to be, whether it's going to be downtown upstairs or in one of those buildings, or it's going to be in someplace around the community. So we need to try and find, if we can figure out that problem, we would really be making a big difference around tech jobs in this town, and not so much let's go to another planet and find people to come here and bring us a business. It's not the model we need.
You know, I echo all of that, and I would say, we're well on our way for that. I think Next Space and Cruz, I have co-working spaces downtown, are a really good model, and if you're not familiar with that, the Next Space, Matthew and I work together up there. We have totally different businesses. We do different things, but it's a shared co-working space with lots and lots of people. And there are lawyers, and there are designers, and there are a bunch of people working together individually, not in silos. And I think there's because we're not Silicon Valley, we're not a big city where you can silo. It's a great resource for businesses who can do 2/3 of what they need to do and need somebody else to do that other third, so people can do a lot of sharing of resources and sharing of innovation. The city has a really aggressive economic development department who works with businesses and startups. There's a growing tech ecosystem, and it's not just tech, it's innovation. There's lots and lots of businesses working upstairs, downtown, and throughout the city. And that is growing. Looker has now, how many employees? 160. They're looking at expanding. Amazon's moving downtown and pulling employees from other places. So all these more small startups are kind of gateways to other, so there's this sort of chicken and egg game where we want the businesses to come here, and the businesses want to know we have the talent. The talent wants to know we have the businesses. But I think it's moving forward at an appropriate rate, because we're really focused on this workforce development, and there's so many opportunities, and we have to set the table for it and deal with the affordable housing and deal with water issues and deal with resources. So it's, there's a waterfall waiting to happen here, and I think that's probably the least.
Well, what do we want? Do we want to have do we want to be San Jose? Or do we want, is there like a certain limit of what kind of tech jobs we want?
Yeah, I think this is obviously kind of easy language to use and it's difficult to achieve, but I think what we want is really something sustainable, and that means environmentally sustainable, but also sustaining kind of what we have. I think we all who live in Santa Cruz have a sense of what our identity is and what we love about it. We need to just make sure we kind of hold on to the bulk of that. And so for me, the key to that goes back to housing, because otherwise, if we don't intervene in the trend, only people with lots of money will be able to live in the city of Santa Cruz, and then that's so not sustainable on so many levels. But the easiest way to think about it is the transportation issue associated with it. That people even if we become very expensive, there will still be a lot of service industry jobs here where people aren't earning enough to live here, so they're going to be traveling from somewhere else, burning fossil fuels, and also just having a more difficult life because they aren't connected to this community. So we need to kind of take on these housing and transportation issues. We need to also sustain a range of jobs, and we can't just be all innovation and tech. We need to cultivate a diverse economy that that can work for lots of different people who come from this community. And then we need to sustain, again, going back to the beginning, sort of the rich culture that we have here that makes this Santa Cruz. We always talk about this, trying to brand the Santa Cruz with other words, but I think we all know the real brand is when we say Santa Cruz itself, there's a brand there. And that goes right to where Jeannie talks about SantaCruz.com doesn't need another adjective. It's like Santa Cruz says so much about who we are.
And I think everybody's doing a good job at actually getting the word out about what Santa Cruz is. We talk about the economic development, they have Choose Santa Cruz. it's a beautiful story now of what's coming out there. You know, SantaCruz.com, and we have other ones.
Just quick, I'll try to be quick here. One of the things that's being said is we shouldn't really go out and try to bring businesses here for the very reasons that Mike's saying. They won't be as attached. What's homegrown startups, because if they start here, they'll be more likely to feel committed and want to stay. And the other thing is that the reason why there's a lot of studies around tech transfer, or not tech transfer so much, but just tech jobs, creation of tech jobs, because they tend to create a lot of other high-level jobs, not just low-level, like attorneys and contractors and physicians, and they create other high-level jobs. So, so that's positive. They will come, you know, if we build it. And also, you know, the numbers I've heard, we have 400 tech companies in this, I guess, the county. That's a lot. Yeah, you know, in North County alone, which is really shocking. Where are they? And they're all, like Chip said, they're in Cruz, Iowa, next to us.
300 are in our office, right?
And, yeah, we aren't going to keep them all. We won't keep them all, but we'll keep some. And then as far as branding goes, you know, I think it's fascinating. Like, one of the things actually Steve Palopoulos, I'll give him the credit, he's our editor. He once said, what we're trying to achieve every single week in Good Times is to define what is the Santa Cruz experience. It's true, Santa Cruz is already a brand, but if you ask people, it's going to mostly be like a laid-back surf town and home of the hippie culture, you know, and it's other things too, but I think we can also direct a little more. I don't think everyone does know about our rich culture. It's
It's got one of the best music festivals in the world.
Yeah, I've heard.
Actually, it's several of the music festivals.
Mike?
So thinking before on this question, I just wanted to add something to what Don had said earlier. When Don's laying out the strategy about, which I think it's actually a brilliant paradigm shift. I've just been I have nothing to do with anybody thinking about it. As Don explained what was going on, I go, wow, that makes sense. But you start thinking, well, who's going to pay for that? Or where you know, that's a lot of money and these kinds of issues. One of the things you discovered early on is the kind of moralizing about the homeless. We're only going to provide the services to people that reach our moral standard. Are they properly prepared to receive the gifts that we want to shower upon them? It turns out it's economically a lot more sensible if you figure out who's costing us the most that's out there on the street. And there's a massive amount of money being wasted by homeless people who are being, how many hours, what percentage of a police officer's time is spent dealing with somebody who's sick and throwing up on the sidewalk when they can be provided some other kind of significant public safety? How many of the people are going to the Dominican hospital, the county and our taxes are paying for their stay at the hospital, and they're in the hospital for 3 days, and then they have to be dealt with, and somebody's paying a bill for them for the 4 days afterwards. If they were in a home in the first place, they would never have gone to the hospital. What's it cost for a person to spend a night in jail? Aside from what they're going to be fined or something, but what does it cost us to keep them in a jail cell versus keep them in a decent small home? It turns out, it's not completely, I don't want to overstate it, it's not going to completely fund itself, but this is not, let's just throw our hard-earned tax dollars at these unworthy people. This is, let's spend our tax dollars in ways that are rational, and at the end of it, you actually have started to solve a problem rather than spend all this money on emergency shelters, on the people who are the most deserving because they're old enough or whatever reason they don't scare you as much as somebody else. And when you're done with the end of it, you have nothing more than when you started. There's still the same number of homeless people, and now you're throwing more money at that problem. So this is something that I think Don was laying out, that it's not going to be easy to make that shift because there's still a lot of people in our community who are thinking, well, I don't mind spending money on the worthy homeless, but not these other ones that are like problematic. You start off by spending the money on the problematic people, you'll end up with a lot less problems in your town, and you'll spend less money in the long run on what you're doing. And it didn't occur to me, I was on the city council for 30 years, 26 years, that idea never occurred to me. I was trying to figure out how I can respond to the public and defend what we're doing because we're not giving money to the bad homeless, we're only giving it to the good. It was not honest, and it was part of the answer because you can't make those distinctions so easily. And worse, it was not an effective strategy.
Okay, so I have two more questions, and the last question is going to touch on homeless as well again. But so you mentioned, G, that you guys went to Washington for the Washington State.
Yeah.
Washington State, yeah. And then you know the chamber, they'll go to different cities and see how things are going, and then a report is done. But what always kills me about these excursions is that what happens after? You know, you're talking about like, you learn words like incubator and accelerator and stuff, yeah. Do we get an accelerator? Do we get an incubator? But like, how do we do action to when we go to these places? Any ideas on how we can do that? Because I feel like there's always some great ideas, like, oh man, we got this great idea from, you know, when we went to San Luis Obispo or San Diego, but then we don't do anything about it. John?
Well, I will say one thing that has been a big part of those trips, which I've participated in a few of them, is to bring the university along, because the energy usually comes from the Chamber of Commerce and the business community locally and the local government. So like, yeah, we need to work on this, and the university is interested in this, but it's not kind of right in the center of their sites. But we really encourage them to participate, and I think this new incubator that the university is starting this year is I'm not going to say it's a direct result of these visits, but it's one of the things that is kind of like we've been hammering away. Look at all these other universities doing this. We aren't doing enough of this. And now I think that is a pretty concrete result of these visits. Is like, yeah, this isn't something we've been doing particularly well. Even though we have a great university, we haven't made that connection. And now I think that connection is growing.
Okay, last question. So, and this is going on 2 hours, the answer here, but what do we want to see and what do we think we see in Santa Cruz in 5 years? There's a certain topic that you see, like maybe, I think that this is going to happen in Santa Cruz in 5 years. We'll be at this point, or you want to be at this point. Either way is fine. Any ideas on that?
In the city.
Yeah, in the city, yeah.
I'll jump, because I know this, and Mike is probably going to jump in on this too. It's really, there's a lot of other things I want, but the toughest one, but the one that I think is most important is some new housing.
Yeah.
That we have a lot of opportunities, and it really has to do with what Mike talked about, smart growth, that we have an urban boundary, we're not going to spread, but we have places where there's opportunities to build relatively high density, and I don't mean 20-story buildings, I mean 5-story buildings in downtown and in a few other more urbanized parts of the community, where we build small rental units in the hundreds. We could really meet some of these needs that we've been talking about that have to do with economic development, but also have to do with just basic human needs. We have not. Santa Cruz has been, as a city, relatively good at committing to building affordable housing, but it's got to be bigger than just the subsidized affordable housing. We just need to say all the housing that's built here, going forward, needs to meet the needs of the community. And frankly, if we never built another suburban-style single-family home in the city of Santa Cruz, that would be fine with me because we have plenty of those. Most of our housing is that type of housing, and it's not really meeting the needs of who's living and working here now.
I would add to that more concretely. I'll give you an idea of a vision of where we can be in 5 years. It won't be done, but you'll see that it's happening. The San Lorenzo River is this neglected, treasure in the middle of our city. It's a drainage ditch. Most of its life since Europeans moved here, it's been a drainage ditch. It flooded all of downtown forever, and then the Army Corps of Engineers in 1960 built a levee. We've got a better levee now. We were able to get to a lot of, it wasn't easy for the Army Corps of Engineers to get them to build a levee that's wider and carry the same amount of water, because their original plan that took us 20 years to stop them from building was to build one with 40-foot high walls, like New Orleans or something, where it would just imagine downtown with the levees looking like that, rather than the way we constructed them, where you could bicycle and walk along them. All on Front Street, there's a bunch of really underutilized properties. You walk along the river levee and look at them. You look at the back of buildings, garbage, cans, where it's in the cans it's nice, but sometimes scattered garbage, stuff in cans. People turn their back on the river. Millions of people over the years go to West Cliff Drive. It's so beautiful and stuff. How many people come to Santa Cruz and go, I'm going to walk along the river levee, the San Lorenzo River. But if you go to San Antonio, or even stuff in California, other places, people turn these rivers into this positive thing. Imagine housing along that front, businesses in the front of it on Front Street, down on the ground floor, but up above housing that faces the river. Not, and there'll be windows out the back on the other side, and want them to look nice, put on a wall of buildings. But imagine something that's really built that's, and not only all affordable, some would be low income affordable, but some of it could be market rate level for professionally owned folks that we're kind of talking about. And imagine you walk out of your door and you walk to the river levee, and that's how you enter and leave your house. There might be a garage that's a common garage. We're tying this into the downtown, possibly, where I'd like it to be, tie it to the downtown transit center, which itself could have childcare for or a health center or some kind of housing on the upper floors. And then you can have hundreds and hundreds of units of housing down there without creating a Cabrini Tower, Chicago, 30-story building that is a place where people go to die and kill each other. But a beautiful, livable place that would face a beautiful urban river. And it looks like the coastal. I'm on the board of the Coastal Watershed Council, and Lori were talking about that this morning. Turn that river into something where there's recreation going there, there's tours, there's active stuff happening on that river, and if people face that river and live up above it and look on it, the problems that are down that river would start to be addressed. Right now, everybody's got their back turned toward it, and nobody cares what happens down there. That can be turned around by this. So this is not just some vague dream. This is something that where there are now people starting to buy up some property, thinking about how they would actually put this project or set of projects together and make it happen. So I can imagine in 5 years we see that project is not yet built, but underway, and it's going to actually happen in some way. And that would be an incredibly exciting possibility. The people that live in that housing would be the folks that we're talking about coming to this tech industry or would be interested in those jobs. Because we're not talking about building slums, we're talking about building beautiful housing that's right in the middle of the urban downtown core. It's real, to me, I can see us there in 5 years.
I just want to say that the other, and I agree, housing's the number one issue, and it's an environmental issue, and it also helps with transportation and traffic. If more people live downtown, we reduce traffic, and the environment, it's just good for the environment if we're not in our cars as much, as well as just the economics for families or couples. Every single adult doesn't need to have a car. I mean, the way most of our country is laid out is every adult has to have a car. But people can get rid of their cars completely or cut back on necessity, and more zip cars and things like that.
I wish we had more. We could, definitely more. But thank you guys very much. Thank you everybody. So we have a few minutes to go and ask more questions. And I think our next panel, without samples, is at 2:15.
I
Yeah.
have one question.
Really like.
I love the potential that our downtown mall has, and I really love Boulder, Colorado's example of what that could, ultimately be. And I'm wondering if any of you have looked at that. We were recently there this last summer, and it was just, they bumped it up a notch and very our sister town. So something like that. And then on the housing issue, what about families? Not like small families, like it seems like the large housing is taken up by students and all the rentals. They want, $1,000 a room, and that's not ideal for people that are raising families.
I can speak to probably both those review the housing and others. The Boulder, you're speaking of the pedestrian access on Boulder. We've looked at that. There's been advocacy for doing a pedestrian mall for years and years. Boulder and a few other places that have very vibrant pedestrian malls have a much greater capacity than we do in terms of the numbers of people. You want crowded sidewalks. We have great 12-foot wide sidewalks. Once you make them that wide, you might not have the capacity. The bigger issue for us in terms of the pedestrian access, and there's lots and lots of studies that have been done, and very few successful ones. Boulder's an extraordinary city. Santa Monica is a really good example. Our parallel streets don't line up, so you can't do cross
Not
traffic.
just that, but the quality, the safety,
Right.
that they have the eclectic, street performers, they've even bumped it up a notch, that kind of stuff, and I've
Sure.
seen that start to happen more. But I mean the safety, no drive-bys, one end of the mall is dark, the other's light, how to lift and lighten our mall and make it family friendly.
Part of the question is suggested is the economic base for this. Think the 3rd Street Mall in Santa Monica. There are 6 six-story parking garages surrounding that mall. They're serving 14 million people from Los Angeles. our base is like about 120,000 people who might come to downtown and live here, and visitors, which maybe doubles the number, but it's not 14 million people. And you don't have the funding that allows you to support the kind of infrastructure that they're in.
However, a lot of the aesthetic and the environmental things that you see in Boulder and Santa Monica is very different, but the Boulder thing is very similar. You know, their campus is right there, so they have a lot of activity. City Council just passed a pilot program to do some parklets downtown, really looking at ways to make it more walkable, more livable. And I think it's worth saying there's a lot of different ideas about transportation and what to do with making Pacific go this way, that way, pedestrian. Transportation is going to change so drastically in the next 10 years, you know, and like completely drastically. So I'm hesitant to do any or recommend any changes right now in terms of that because, you know, we're looking at the impact of a single car being totally different in the next 10 years and how is that going to work with more car sharing. But I think the more we can focus on walkability, pedestrian, after we just produced the Downtown Association with support from the city, produced a busker festival last week. We're going to be doing that monthly, bringing musicians downtown and really kind of encouraging that vibrancy. So, you know, again, you know, go see live music and engage in it because what's going to make that happen is more people downtown. When more people are living downtown, when more people are going out, then it is vibrant, exciting, and safe. You know, the places that aren't safe, don't feel safe because no one's there.
Right? I want to just try to answer both of those questions together because one of the, and this is maybe oversimplifying, but it's a good example, is there's a lot of movement around where the transit center is, where the bus center is, to build both there on that site and on the sites right adjacent to it a lot more housing, rental housing. So that will enliven, if that is done, that will enliven that part of Pacific Avenue and brighten it, I think, in the way that you're talking about. So that'll help all those people and people shopping and living there, taking care of it. And at the same time, goes at that housing issue, which is one of the reasons so many students are occupying single-family homes that are better, more suitable for families, is that's really the only choice they have. If both the university is doing this and the city does more of it, of building more apartments and rental housing that really is exactly what students would like to live in, they won't take up all the single-family homes. And so we really just need to get at that. I don't think we need to build more single-family housing. We need to free up existing single-family housing by creating more rental housing.
And again, the place to do that, tied with the transportation issues, we have all these arterial streets, Soquel Avenue, Mission Street, and back to my comment about where we're going, I'm an optimistic person. I think we can get where we want to go because if we want to do it, we can make it happen. But honestly, it's not going to be an easy path. Every time the city comes up with a housing proposal that would be good for families or more apartments along Soquel Avenue, the immediate neighbors right behind go, oh, you know, we don't, someone say, well, there's going to create more traffic. Well, yes, it will on Soquel Avenue and stuff. It's not going to destroy your small little single-family residential neighborhood or something. But along Soquel, all these major streets, you can go to 3 stories along those streets. It wouldn't be the end of the world. You wouldn't be building like Armageddon or like what everybody's vision of the nightmare San Jose experience or something. But every one of those housing projects is a fight right now in the city. And every one of those projects, people come out there in principle against the idea of a 3-story building. I give quotes like in meetings. Santa Cruz is not a 3-story kind of place. Well, the whole town can't be 3 stories, but there are places where it makes sense to build 3-story apartments so that housing can be left for families with a yard where the kids can run around. And you've got to, suggestion, you've got to put those things together, and it requires a population that sees the total picture. So it's not just a fight about this little housing project. It's about, do we want to have housing in this town for jobs, housing in this town so that there's cultural diversity, housing so we can get the tech development that we want to see happen, those kinds of things. It has to be seen as a big picture. And we have to have people come out and defend that housing, not just the people that show up to the meeting who don't like it because it's near their house.
Well, and housing reduces traffic too. You know, it actually is counterintuitive. The more housing we build, the less transportation.
And we also now we've purchased a rail line, which is you walk along that rail line, which I've done a couple times the whole way and stuff. There's a whole bunch of places out there that wouldn't possibly be appropriate within the urban corridor. that'd be appropriate for some additional housing. Right now, you can't get to it, but if a light rail thing ran down there and people could get off at various stations, we're not without the resources to build this housing. We need the will to build this housing. That's the problem.
Okay, well, I think we have our next panel coming in, so thank you so much for your witness.